The rain came soft that night, whispering over the shingles of St. Mary's Chapel, a sound that should have meant peace. But Deputy Mara Ellison's K-9 Duke stood stiff at the basement door, nails wrinkled like something alive waited beneath. The air smelled of wet stone and old incense, the kind that clings to grief. Behind her, the empty pews creaked. Somewhere in the dark, a bell swung once, though no one had touched it in years. By the time she pulled the door open, she already knew whatever was buried down there, someone had wanted it to stay hidden. Mara Ellison's boots sank into the puddles forming along the church steps, each splash echoing faintly against the stone walls. Rain blurred the stained glass windows into strange, distorted mosaics, saints' faces melting into grotesque smears of color. She tightened the leash around Duke's neck, feeling the tension radiate through him. The German shepherd's ears were rigid, nostrils flaring as he pressed against the basement door like he could smell the secrets lurking beneath it. "You sure about this, Duke?" Mara whispered, though she already knew the answer. The dog didn't need her permission. His growl was low and steady, vibrating to the concrete floor like a warning. Something about this place had shifted overnight. She had patrolled St. Mary's countless times, but never had the air felt so thick, so alive. Inside, the church smelled of damp wood, rotting pews, and the faint metallic tang of old blood. Though she couldn't say from how long ago, light from her flashlight pooled over the floor, the beam trembling as the wind rattled the walls. She had grown up in Red Hollow. She knew every shadow. Yet here, in this space she thought she understood, the shadows seemed to breathe back. Duke's paw scrabbled again at the door. The basement latch creaked, and Mara's stomach dropped. The first step down was slick. Wet boots slid against stone, echoing too loudly. Duke's growl deepened, reverberating in the cramped stairwell. Something was down there. She knew it. Not a stray animal. Not even a vagrant hiding from the storm. Something deliberately hidden. "You're not imagining it," she muttered to herself, gripping the flashlight tighter. Behind her, the pews groaned under their own age, or perhaps under memories they weren't meant to remember. She tried to summon the calm of her years on the force, the procedural mindset, the detached professional she relied on for calls like this. But the hair on her neck stood anyway. The basement smelled older the deeper she went. Damp stone gave way to rot, and the faint scent of decay teased the edges of her senses. Her eyes adjusted to the shadows, revealing boxes stacked haphazardly, rusted tools leaning against the walls, and a series of wooden crates stamped with faded letters she couldn't quite read. Duke nosed along the floor, ears twitching. Then he stopped. His paw jabbed at a corner where the basement wall met the floor. Mara crouched, flashlight beam dancing over the ground. Her breath hitched as she saw it. A trapdoor, nearly invisible under layers of dust and grime, freshly scratched at the edges. Duke's growl was almost human now, insistent, anxious. "Someone's been here," Mara breathed, forcing herself not to shake. Every horror story she'd ever read, or worse, lived through in her job, rushed into her mind. The trapdoor wasn't just old. It had been used recently, and whatever lay beneath wasn't meant for anyone's eyes. The first time she opened it, the hinges groaned like a dying animal. Rainwater dripped down the stone walls, plinking into a shallow puddle below. Duke circled once, then leaned down, sniffing at the darkness like he could divine the sins buried within. Mara swallowed. Her hand hovered over the flashlight switch, her other gripping the edge of the trapdoor. The air that hit her face smelled of earth and decay, not the smell of something centuries old, but something carefully concealed, buried by hands that knew better than to be discovered. A muffled noise caught her attention, though she couldn't identify its source. Something was moving down there, or had recently moved. Her radio crackled in the silence. "Mara, everything okay?" It was Deputy Owens, her partner and closest friend in the force, though she never fully trusted him with the depths of her instincts. "Yeah," she answered, voice low. "Just checking the basement. Duke's on point." "Copy that. Just be careful. You're the only one on site." Mara swallowed, biting back a surge of irritation. Owens never understood her instincts. He saw facts. She saw the shadows behind them. Duke whined softly, pressing closer to her as if sensing the tension crawling along her spine. Stepping down, Mara's flashlight swept across the basement floor. Each step was deliberate. The trapdoor yawned like a black mouth, inviting her into something she wasn't sure she wanted to see. And then she noticed it. Faint marks on the floor, half covered by dirt. Drag marks, too straight, too deliberate to be accidental. Something had been moved here recently. Something heavy. Her fingers brushed against the edge of a crate. It was light, almost suspiciously so. She nudged it aside and froze. Beneath it lay a shape, draped in a black tarp. What from the leak above, the fabric stuck to the contours beneath, giving away the outline. Distinctly human. Duke's growl spiked and Mara's stomach clenched. She forced herself to remain calm, training her thoughts into procedural clarity. Evidence. Look at it as evidence first. Don't panic. Pulling back the tarp slowly, carefully, Mara's flashlight revealed the first horrifying truth. A body, wrapped in chains, eyes blindfolded, wrists and ankles bound. Skin pale and mottled, hair slicked with moisture. And in the corner of the room, scrawled across the wall in dried blood, a single word, forgiven. Mara staggered back, a hand pressed over her mouth. Her mind raced. Who? Why? And how had no one noticed this in a church she had walked past a dozen times a week for years? Duke's ears flicked to the sound of movement above. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. Calculated. Someone was in the church, watching. The radio crackled again, louder this time. Mara, you there? She didn't answer. Not yet. Her instinct screamed that any movement might alert whoever was watching. The rain outside intensified, drumming on the roof in a deafening rhythm. Shadows danced across the basement walls. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Father Callahan, the old priest of St. Mary's, warning her years ago about secrets in the town. Red Hollow has bones, he'd said, voice trembling. We just cover them up and pray no one finds them. Mara's breath hitched. She thought she understood secrets, crime, corruption, but this was something else. This was deliberate, personal, a statement, and the word forgiven carved in blood made her stomach twist. Someone here was punishing, yes, but also preaching. Morally certain, morally gray, and deeply dangerous. Duke pressed against her leg. He had a point, his warning clear. The basement wasn't just hiding a victim. It was hiding a story. And stories, she knew, had a way of reaching out, even decades later, demanding to be told. The door above creaked again. Step. Pause. Step. Someone was coming down. Mara crouched beside the body, heart hammering in a rhythm that seemed to echo through the stone walls. The intruder hadn't yet seen her, or Duke. The first light of dawn, thin and gray, seeped through a crack in the basement window, illuminating the chains that bound the figure. Mara realized then, this wasn't just a crime scene. This was a stage. And she unwillingly had become a player. The footsteps grew louder. The intruder's shadow stretched across the basement stairs. Mara gritted her teeth, forcing herself into silence. Her mind raced through options, each more dangerous than the last. Escape? Alert Owens? Confront whoever had hidden this horror for who knows how long? Duke's growl deepened, her pulse synchronized with his, both predator and protector. The intruder's hand brushed the stair railing. Mara knew instinctively. Any sound, any wrong move could end in death, not just for her, but for Duke and possibly for the victim. The intruder paused at the bottom step. Heavy breathing, wet footsteps on stone, and then silence. Mara could feel the weight of their gaze, though she couldn't see the eyes. She pressed herself lower, barely breathing. Something about the shadowed figure above felt familiar, too familiar. The tilt of the head, the stiffness in the shoulders. A whisper broke the silence, low and deliberate. I knew someone would find him eventually. Mara's blood ran cold. That voice, she knew it. And she understood something she hadn't wanted to admit. In Red Hollow, betrayal ran closer than family. Someone she had trusted had returned, or had never really been gone. The basement was no longer just a hiding place. It was a trap, a confession, and a test. Mara realized then, with a chill that spread to her bones, this was only the beginning. Duke's growl sharpened into a warning. Mara's hand moved toward the body, both to protect and understand. Whatever lay beneath St. Mary's wasn't buried by accident. Someone had chosen this place, this time, and now they were waiting to see who would survive their reckoning. And Mara knew, deep down, that she couldn't leave without answers, even if finding them meant confronting the person she least expected. The intruder didn't move. The basement felt impossibly small now, the air thick with damp and dread. Mara's chest rose and fell in shallow, silent breaths. Duke's growl had softened but didn't disappear. The dog's eyes tracked every shadow, every hint of motion above. Mara could feel the pulse of something ancient in these stone walls, a rhythm of secrecy and malice that had been waiting decades for someone to stumble into it. Slowly, the figure descended. The beam from Mara's flashlight cut across a familiar coat, worn at the edges, smelling faintly of tobacco and old cedar. Mara's throat tightened. She had hoped it wasn't him, the man she had trusted most in the town, Deputy Owens. But no, Owens would never have come alone, not with a basement like this and a body chain like a sermon on sin. "Stay back," she whispered, though she knew it was too late. The intruder's eyes gleamed in the dim light, unreadable but calculating. "You shouldn't have come here." "I didn't," Mara said carefully. "I was just checking the basement. Duke found something." She gestured toward the body, trying to keep her voice level. The man, no, the shadowed figure, didn't flinch. "Found it? Or were you led here?" His voice was quiet, measured, yet every word carried the weight of accusation. Mara's mind raced. Was this someone punishing the town? Or punishing her? "Who is this?" she asked, voice steadier than she felt. A crooked smile, a shadow against the flashlight's glare. "Some things can't stay buried forever. You know that." Duke shifted, teeth bared slightly, but Mara held him back. Her partner wasn't just a dog. He was her anchor, her instinct made physical. She needed calm, clarity. The figure stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, almost ceremonial. "The town prays, they forget, they pretend sins can be washed away," he continued. "But someone always remembers." His eyes flicked to the chains binding the body. "And sometimes someone has to make them remember the cost of silence." Mara's stomach twisted. Silence. Red Hollow had plenty of it. Missing people, rumors, lies that wrapped around families like ivy. And now, the basement was proof that silence had consequences. "You didn't have to do this," she said, though her own voice sounded thin in the damp, echoing space. "I didn't do anything," he replied smoothly, almost arrogantly. "I'm only clarifying history." History? Mara's mind struggled to reconcile the word with the horror in front of her. The body was young, too young, and the chains deliberate, brutal. Whoever this person was, they weren't just punishing someone, they were making a statement. And statements, Mara knew, always had an audience. "You think hiding them here will erase the truth?" she asked. "You think a body in the basement will cover decades of failures?" The intruder's eyes softened, for a moment, then hardened again. "It's not about erasing, Mara. It's about witnessing. You're witnessing now, and witnessing changes people. You'll understand soon enough." Mara swallowed, keeping her hands visible, keeping Duke close. She needed leverage, a way to survive this without becoming part of the statement herself. "Who is this?" she repeated. The figure's smile returned, faint, predatory. "You really don't know yet? That's the tragedy." He crouched near the body, inspecting the chains as if admiring the craft of their construction. Some truths they're meant to be learned the hard way. Her mind flashed to the missing files she had discovered months ago, files about Red Hollow's forgotten children, the ones parents claimed had run away or drowned, reports that disappeared. Her own investigation into the town's buried scandals, which someone clearly had been following. "You," she breathed. All of this, you've been tracking me?" The intruder nodded. "I've been waiting, patient, watching, teaching. You were always the curious one. I just expedited the lesson." Curiosity had always been Mara's strength, and now, perhaps, her weakness. Every investigative instinct told her to run, to call for backup, to escape while she could. But the figure's presence was magnetic, almost hypnotic. She stayed, partly out of fear, partly out of the need to understand. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above the whisper of dripping water. "Not what you think," he said, standing now, his silhouette cutting a perfect line against the basement's gloom. "I want understanding, witnessing, recognition, a confession, if you will. Someone has to bear the weight of what the town has forgotten." Mara's eyes narrowed. "This is vengeance?" "Not vengeance," he corrected sharply. "Balance, closure, history written in a medium that can't lie." His gaze swept over the body. "And history, Mara, demands witnesses." A noise echoed upstairs. The front door creaking, wet footsteps across the wooden floor. Mara's pulse quickened. Someone else was here, or had been watching. The intruder's attention shifted for the briefest moment, eyes darting toward the stairwell. Mara seized the opportunity. She edged closer to the body, freeing one hand to press her radio button. Owens now. Static, then silence. Her stomach sank. The figure had predicted this, anticipated it. "You'll need more than radios to survive here," he said, moving with unnerving calm. "This is my design. Everyone else? Merely part of the scenery." Mara realized she had underestimated him. Years of investigation had hardened her, but the man in front of her was different. Cold, calculated, and morally complex. A mixture of justice and cruelty she couldn't reconcile. "Why here?" she asked finally, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "Why the church?" "Sanctuary," he said softly. "Because sins hide behind sanctuaries. Because faith can blind people to truth. And because this town needed to be reminded that even sacred places have shadows." Mara felt a tremor of understanding and disgust. Every missing child, every hushed rumor, every file that disappeared from the sheriff's office, it was all part of this intricate tapestry. And the figure before her, the morally gray orchestrator of it all, had pulled each thread with ruthless precision. Duke growled, breaking the tension, and Mara looked down at him. The dog's ears flicked toward the body, eyes hard. He understood. The intruder, too, recognized the warning. For a fleeting moment, Mara thought she saw hesitation. Then it was gone, replaced with the same cold, unyielding control that defined him since he entered the basement. "I can't let you leave," he said finally, voice low. "Not until you understand." Mara's mind raced. Her instincts screamed escape. But the body, the chains, the meticulous cruelty, she couldn't just abandon it. She couldn't allow another secret to be swallowed by the darkness of Red Hollow. And then it hit her, the twist she hadn't expected. This man, the intruder, had once been someone she trusted implicitly. Someone who had stood beside her on countless calls, who had shared confidences, who had laughed and bled alongside her. Owens. Or maybe not him exactly, but someone equally close, equally familiar, now transformed into an agent of moral retribution. "You!" she whispered, voice shaking. "This, you're the one covering it up? All these years?" The intruder tilted his head, expression unreadable. "No, I'm revealing it. You see, Mara, the truth doesn't wait. And neither do I." Duke barked sharply, snapping Mara from her paralysis. She seized his collar and stepped back, heart-hammering. The intruder's eyes followed her every movement, calculating, patient. But Mara had learned one thing over her career. People, even those who seem untouchable, make mistakes when they underestimate fear. Her eyes darted to chains. One small tool, one quick motion, and the victim might live. One misstep, and everything could end in death. Hers, Duke's, or the innocent still trapped in the basement. Time seemed to stretch. Outside, the rain hammered harder, thrumming against the stone, blending with the sound of dripping water inside. The basement, once a place of hidden sins, now became a crucible, testing every shred of courage, loyalty, and morality Mara possessed. And in that moment, she realized the truth. The intruder's game wasn't about violence alone. It was about control, about proving that even in the smallest town, beneath the quietest chapel, the past could command the present. And she, Mara Ellison, stubborn, curious, morally flawed, had just walked into the epicenter. The intruder took a slow step forward, and Mara knew the next move would define everything. Would she confront him, fight him, or somehow outmaneuver a mind that had planned this for decades? And would Duke, loyal as ever, be enough to protect her and the secret victim from the moral storm that had descended upon St. Mary's basement? The answers were buried in shadows, in chains, and in the heart of someone Mara had once called ally. And the storm outside promised there would be no easy morning. The air in St. Mary's basement felt suffocating now, thick with the stench of damp stone and iron-tinged blood. Mara pressed herself against the cold wall, Duke at her side, muscles coiled and ready. Every heartbeat felt magnified, echoing like a drum in confined space. The intruder, familiar, terrifying, morally unmoored, had stepped closer, eyes calculating, expression unreadable. "You should leave," Mara said, voice shaking but firm. "Whatever this is, it's not yours to control." Control? The intruder laughed softly, low and bitter, a sound that scraped at the edges of her nerves. "Control is an illusion, Mara. I'm here to correct negligence, to remind Red Hollow that some sins demand acknowledgement." Mara swallowed hard. She couldn't deny the truth in his words, but that didn't make his methods acceptable. "By torturing someone?" she asked, gesturing toward the chained body. "By chaining a child's corpse in a church basement?" The figure's gaze flicked to the chains, then to her, narrowing. "Not a child," he said quietly, almost mournfully. "Not anymore. But yes, a victim of neglect, of oversight, of people pretending evil didn't exist. And now the town will witness. You will witness." Mara's stomach lurched. Her instincts screamed that she needed action, yet every step was fraught with danger. She glanced at Duke, whose body was tense, eyes locked on the intruder. The dog understood the stakes. If Mara miscalculated, none of them would walk away. A movement above, the creaking of stairs, the shifting of shadows. Someone else was in the church. Mara realized Owens, or at least someone acting with him, was part of the trap all along. Or perhaps it had been orchestrated by the intruder alone, drawing her into witness, to judge, to carry the weight of truth. "You brought me here," Mara said, voice hardening. "Not to punish, not to avenge. You wanted me to see." The intruder nodded, slow, deliberate. "Exactly. You always wanted answers. Mara, now you have them. What you do with them defines you." Duke growled low, and Mara's hand instinctively went to the chains. The lock was old, rusted, probably vulnerable if handled carefully. One wrong move, though, and the intruder would strike. She weighed her options quickly, retreat and call backup, risk leaving the body, or act. Her gaze flicked to the chains again. Slowly, deliberately, she moved, tried to appear casual. Duke shifted with her, ready to intervene. Her fingers brushed the lock, and then the intruder moved, swift, predatory, a blur of intention. "You think you can stop this?" he hissed, voice sharp. "You think you can undo decades of silence?" Mara froze, every muscle coiled, every instinct screaming. But then, something in his movement betrayed hesitation, a flicker of doubt. For a fraction of a second, the man she had once trusted, or thought she had trusted, revealed that beneath the calculated cruelty was a conscience, fractured and guilty, yet still human. That moment was all she needed. With a sudden surge, she yanked the lock free, freeing the chains. The tarp shifted, revealing the figure beneath. Pale, limp, but breathing, the child, or what was left of them, had survived. Somehow. The intruder's face twisted, half with anger, half with relief. Mara didn't have time to analyze. She pulled the body closer, shielding from the figure. "It's over," she said, voice steel against fear. "Leave. Now." The intruder's shoulders slumped, almost imperceptibly. "Over," he whispered. "It's never over. Not for them. Not for us." Mara didn't answer. She pressed forward, Duke at her side, guiding the body toward the stairs. The man followed slowly, eyes cold but resigned. The tension that had gripped the basement for decades seemed to unravel in the heavy rain and dim dawn light seeping through the windows. Once outside, the air hit Mara like a promise, crisp, wet, alive. Rain soaked through her coat, dripping down onto the steps, washing some of the basement's oppressive weight from her soul. She knelt beside the rescued figure, checking for signs of life. Weak pulse, shallow breathing. Alive. Duke nudged her hand, nuzzling her as if to say, "We did it." Mara allowed herself a brief exhale, relief mingling with the exhaustion pressing on her bones. The intruder had vanished back into the church, leaving shadows behind, but the truth was out. The child, the victim of decades of neglect and lies, was no longer buried in secrecy. Hours later, the town would buzz with questions. Stories would surface, records reopened, parents confronted with truths they had tried to ignore. And Mara would bear witness. The moral weight she had feared now a quiet armor she carried with dignity. She stood, looking at Duke, rain dripping from his fur. "We did good, boy," she whispered. The dog pressed against her leg, silent affirmation. Together, they watched the St. Mary's Chapel, once a place of hidden sins, stood in the pale morning light, a monument to secrets unearthed, but also to resilience. Mara knew the intruder had left clues, signs, a trail that would continue to haunt the town. But she also knew something more important. The power of conscience, courage, and witness could outweigh even decades of silence and fear. And somewhere in the shadows of the church, the intruder watched, moral compass fractured but intact, knowing the cycle wasn't complete. Yet for Mara, the basement's horrors were resolved, the child safe, and the rain washing the town renewed. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future converge. Duke barked softly, and Mara smiled faintly. The storm had passed, but the lessons of Red Hollow, its sins and secrets, would linger, not as terror, but as a reminder that truth always finds a way. As she walked away, her radio finally crackled to life. "Mara, status. Safe," she said softly, voice carrying both fatigue and relief. "And we'll handle the rest. The truth comes next." Duke trotted beside her, ears alert. The rain had softened, the world washed clean for now. The town would heal, slowly, painfully, and Mara would carry the memory of the basement, the chains, and the child forever. And in the quiet aftermath, Mara realized something profound. Courage wasn't about not fearing the dark. It was about stepping into it anyway, guided by the light of conscience, loyalty, and love. Even when the world seemed to conspire against you, the church stood behind them, silent, its shadows less oppressive now. Mara, Ellison, and Duke had faced what others feared and survived. The past acknowledged, the present protected, and the future, fragile but full of possibility.